Welcome to Executive Talk. I am so excited to have the one and only Daniel Gefen joining with us today. How are you today?
Doing good. How are you doing?
I am doing awesome. I kind of feel like you're the man that needs no introduction. I feel like you are so publicly out there all the time that like there isn't really anything to say about you that's like, new and exciting. It's just like it's all there. I'm so excited you're here.
Oh, that's first of all, thank you for the compliment. Second of all, there's always something new and exciting. There's always every day there's got to be something new and exciting.
It is definitely true. So, whatchamacallit? So what the goal of what we're here to talk about is, look, we definitely want to talk about podcasts. That is the goal here. I want to hear all about it. But you are a businessman. You are a Renaissance man. You are an entrepreneur. You're an author, business founder. You've been really growing your professional reputation for a little bit. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, where you came from, how you got to this point?
Yeah. So, warning, I could talk for hours, so I'm going to give you the abridged version. I'll give you like the very short version, and you can always just ask me to elaborate on whenever you want.
No problem. I'm also really good at cutting people off, so just feel free to talk however you want. We'll just see what happens.
Yeah, please cut me off. I guess my backstory really is I was a classroom clown in high school.
Nice.
I was addicted to attention and really just performed so that people could, give me awards. Kind of like today you have Facebook, you put up a post and then people give you likes and you're like, oh my God, I got a like. Oh my, they commented. Oh. And you keep checking and refreshing to make sure how many more people. Well, that was basically what I was doing, but I was doing it without Facebook or Instagram to give you that kind of, dopamine hit. I was just I was doing it by jumping on tables in the classroom and getting detention for that.
So when Facebook finally launched, you're like, oh man, that's so passé already. I've been doing that for years.
Yeah, well, it was feeding my addiction, and it was really bad. But I had to sort of get off. I had to stop going on Facebook so much because it was really bad for me.
Right.
Which we can kind of get into. I mean, I like you mentioned the book that I wrote. I wrote the Self-Help Addict, which was all about being addicted to self-help, which we can get into. But so I was this classroom clown, and the thing is that I started off as a happy clown. I was this happy-go-lucky guy that was just wanted to have fun and just wanted to get attention. And then I became the sad clown because I realized that, people were laughing at me and not with me. And
Got it.
Essentially I became just this sort of, monkey just to perform for people's benefit. And I sort of got very depressed in my teens. But I wouldn't show it because, that was a sign of weakness, right? So I kept up the performance. I kept wearing the mask and I kept showing up. But I was miserable inside. And
That's
so
horrible.
Yeah, it's terrible. But fast forward many years, I did a lot of self work, and thank God, got married to a wonderful woman, and built up my confidence, my inner confidence, and essentially now I perform. I use the gift that was given to me to be able to perform, but now I don't do it from a place of need and from a place of addiction. I try to do it from a place of really wanting to help other people and trying to put myself out there and genuinely just using my strengths to do what I'm good at.
That's amazing. I'm a firm believer in that. Look, as someone who has also fought to become the person that I am today, I totally can appreciate and resonate with the idea of being able to turn your struggles into your strengths. And that's obviously it's a whole topic for a conversation for a whole nother time. But it's what I find so cool about that is that it really makes those strengths pop out in really inspirational but influential ways. And it's those businesses and those ideas that really push out there that you do it for the need and for the want of the altruistic opportunity. those are the ones that really tend to stick, because I think people deep down understand and appreciate and resonate with the same, with the same values, and they appreciate that as well. I think, you know.
Yeah. And there might be some people listening to this saying, well, that sounds great, Daniel, but like, how do I do that? Right. Like if someone came to me, if I heard this podcast, 15, 20 years ago, I would have been like, that sounds great, but what do I do? Like,
right.
what's the practical advice? So for me, I think, Abraham is Avram Avinu. I don't know. Your audience is a mix. So Abraham.
Yep.
Everyone knows Abraham. He's the biblical, forefather to everyone. So he really teaches how to do this. What's really incredible about Abraham is that he loved everyone, right? He had a tremendous love for every single person. It didn't matter who you were, right? Or whether you believed in what he believed in. And on the other hand, nobody believed in what he believed in. They all were against him. He was against the whole world. He was a man on his own mission. And, people would even call him crazy, and they'd throw him into fires and all sorts of crazy stuff, right? And yet, although he had the love for the person, he knew how to separate the person from what the person believed. Correct. And so he cared very deeply about who you were as a person, but he didn't care about what you thought about him. And I think that's a distinction. I could love you as a person, but I don't have to care about what you think about me, because it's got nothing to do with me, really. It's you.
And the truth could be said about business also, is that I can love your business. I think what you're doing is fabulous, but you're a total jerk. I don't want to have anything to do with you as an individual. Like it could go both ways. Not applying you specifically, Mr. Daniel Gefen, but cool. In
Yeah, I tend to try not to do business with jerks, though. I've done a lot of business with a lot of jerks, and I decided not. Better not.
I have the same policy, better to appreciate the people that you work with and get stuck with the ones that, what does it do for you at the end of the day,
Exactly. So true.
Okay, cool. So you were a class clown. You decided that you wanted to crave that attention as you continue to go on. So how did that get you to where you are today?
Okay. So, one thing that I knew is I didn't fit the mold, right? So high school, I didn't like sitting in the classroom. I didn't like listening to what they were teaching. I wasn't interested in it, right? I was bored. I didn't like the fact that you can only go to the bathroom if you ask permission, or you can't eat until you're told to eat. I hated all of that, right? Let me do what I want to do, right? So that now in high school, you get in trouble, you get detention for that, fine. In the real world, meaning once you graduate and you go into the world of business and you start working for people, you don't get detention, you get fired, right? You don't show up when you're supposed to show up, you're fired. You decide to go off and take vacation for 3 weeks, you're fired. Like that doesn't work. So I learned very quickly that I couldn't work for anyone. It just didn't work for me. I was looking for a certain lifestyle, and it didn't fit. And so at one point, about 10 years ago, my wife turned around to me and said to me, why don't you start your own business? And I said to my wife, I said, what the heck do I know about business? I have no idea. I don't know how to start a business. I wouldn't know where to begin. And she's like, well, I believe in you, and I think you can do it. And anything you want, you can do if you really want it. And those were wise words. And I went and started my first company. Got into a lot of crazy stuff that happened, a lot of fires. I didn't know how to, there was a lot of things I didn't know how to do. It's interesting, Aaron, because you said earlier, that, turn your struggles into your success, right? So yeah. I would just add a caveat onto that. I would say that not necessarily all your struggles have to be your success. I would say that some of your struggles, and actually a lot of your struggles, could end up just being delegated or outsourced to someone else who enjoys those struggles. I didn't enjoy managing people. I didn't enjoy hiring and firing people. I made a 62-year-old woman cry one time, and I felt terrible.
They have rules against that, Daniel. They have rules against that.
And I'm a nice guy. I'm not like I'm not an evil person. So it kind of really, I'm not one of these businessmen who are like really like, I'm going to run you over, as long as I make money. I don't care about you. You can die for I'm not that kind of person. It's not my personality. you know.
Right.
So when I had this 62-year-old woman working for me and she had a bad day and she just kind of didn't handle a client call the way that I wanted her to handle it, and I told her off about it, and I got really emotional because this is my baby, she just burst out crying, and I'm this 25-year-old little kid, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't do this. This is not what I don't want to do this.
Listen, I did not sign up for that.
Yeah, I didn't sign up for this, man. So I realized very quickly, like, I hated doing stuff like managing people, hiring people, firing people, chasing invoices as well, like chasing money. When I had clients who owed me money, especially when it was like a small amount, like it could be like, you know, someone owes me like $70, right? And I'm like getting on the call every day to chase this $70. Like, Daniel, what the heck are you doing? Like, you've wasted so much time. You basically, like, what are you, like, worth $5 an hour? Like, what are you doing? But I was so emotionally attached to it that I felt like I had to chase this. And so I realized I need to delegate. I need to outsource the tasks that I'm getting too attached to and that I don't enjoy doing and that I'm not good at. Right. So if it falls into any of those three buckets, right, if it's I'm getting too emotionally attached, you need to outsource, or you need to delegate. If I don't like doing this, then why do it? Delegate it, outsource it. That's the beauty of having your own business. People forget when you work for someone else, you have to do things that you have to do. When you're your own boss, you can delegate, you can outsource things.
Now, I gotta tell you though, it takes a very strong person to be able to outsource and delegate things that are very personal, right? In other words, like, most people would say the things that are most personal to me are the things that I have to do, right? And I expect other people to do it with me also, right? And in my opinion, look, there's, when you're talking about management and leadership, the best leaders and managers are actually, I have a whole bit about what's the difference between a manager and a leader, but whatever. Let's talk about leaders at this point, right? Is that the sign of a strong leader is the one who is able to acknowledge where their weaknesses are and to look for different solutions. And that is not an easy thing. And I would not underestimate yourself and your approach to building your business as looking at, be like, yeah, of course, that's just what you have to do. Most people don't do that. And I think that's a super way of being able to approach your businesses.
Yeah. And the third thing I was going to mention is things you don't that you're not good at. Right. So if you're not good at it, you should definitely be delegating and outsourcing, and you should be focusing on your strengths, the things that you're really good at. I realize that I'm great at presenting. I'm great at selling. I'm great at making connections, strategic partnerships, strategic thinking, creative ideas, all of that stuff. Those are things that I want to be spending my whole day on. Right. And not on the other things. A lot of this came about just out of really being with my back against the wall. Like I told you, the 62-year-old woman bursting out crying, that was me with my back against the wall. My head, I guess, COO, chief operating officer, who basically ran my whole entire company for me, when she became suicidal and called me up and said she couldn't come into work ever again because she basically needed to check herself into an institution. Okay. That was me with my back against the wall, realizing, okay, I'm going to lose my entire business unless I figure out a way around this. And so I ended up outsourcing the entire company. Okay. But the point is that I think that a lot of times we end up just by going out and being in the battle zone, we learn to figure things out. Most people spend their time planning the battle. And the problem is that you can never plan, because what happens in the battle, there's so many things that come up. And when you're alive, it's totally different to when you're, just reading about it or thinking about it. So my advice to most people is always just to get yourself in there. Whatever you're thinking about doing right now, and this is a challenge that I put to anyone listening to this right now, whatever you're thinking about doing right now, go and do it. Just go and start doing it. Stop pushing it off. I thought about moving to Israel when I would retire, when my kids would be out of school, when they would be basically out of the house. And then I decided 4 years ago, I said to my wife, why would we wait? Let's just do it now. Like, why wait? And it's the same thing with anything. Don't wait, because if you wait, it may never happen. And if it does happen,
And also, you don't know what you need to work on and grow from if you don't start the process. If you're always contemplating, thinking, and like waiting for it to be perfect. Look, we kind of, when we talk to our clients a lot, some of the things that we ask, that they talk to us about is, well, when's the right time to begin this campaign? When's the right time to do our rebrand? When's the right time to get into this thing? And we tell them, I said, if you wait for everything to be perfect, you will never start. Like, we have to start so that we know what we're working with, how to handle it, and then how to improve upon it. Because then that's where that success comes from, and you have to grow with it. You can't just, wait for it to happen, when it's all done.
Yeah, 100%. And also try not to, worry about what everyone else says, because I'll give you an example. I'm very bullish. I'm very, the way that I work is I push until I'm told, like, Daniel, go jump in a lake. Yeah, go jump in a lake, right? Go drown yourself, Daniel. That's my point of, like, okay, I'll back off now. And I'll give you an example. So again, in my first company, I was the sales guy. I was the customer service rep. I was the secretary. I made a very nice secretary. I was the the debt collector. I was everything.
Yeah.
So when I had my sales hat on, I would call people, and unless they told me, no, I'm not interested, I would basically call them every single day, like, just to follow up. Hey, I'm just following up. Like, you said you're interested, so let's get going, And so there was this one guy, his name was Mark. And on the 6th day that I called him, he's like, Daniel, enough already. He called me 6 days in a row, and he started lecturing me. And then he went into this 20-minute lecture about how there's a big difference between, tenacity and desperation and harassing and da-da-da. And he gave me this whole big thing. And then at the end, he says, but anyway, Daniel, I'm signing up. So here's my form. I'm sending it over by email. So right. he becomes a client. But this is the first part, that the story doesn't end there. Listen to this. About 30 minutes later, I get a phone call, and it's Mark. And I'm like, oh no, he's probably going to give me another lecture and tell me why he's not signing up or whatever. Like, I was just worried.
Yeah.
He goes, listen, Daniel, I've been thinking about it. You probably don't know who I am, but I'm a VC. I'm an angel investor. I just sold my previous company for £300 million. And I'd like to invest in you because you're highly investable. Can you believe this? Like, I like your tenacity, and
oh my God, that's amazing. Yeah.
So he wanted to invest in my company, and we ended up meeting, and I turned him down because he wanted too much. But
got it.
But the moral of the lesson of the story that I learned is that people say no, and then you end up just doing it your way. And if you keep pushing, if you keep going, you have to just. Yes, I listen to people. I have advisors. I'm always getting advice from mentors all the time, spiritual mentors, business mentors, relationship mentors. But at the same time, you also have something called, a gut, right? And when your gut speaks, you got to listen. You got to keep going. And a lot of people,
I totally appreciate that. So in your opinion, in your experience, right, having gone through the stages of this, what does it take then, through all your trials, through all your successes, through all your learning opportunities, okay, they're not failures, they're learning opportunities. What does it take to build a successful business?
Oh man, that's such a vague question.
I know, but you're so good at like pinpointing all to the details. So
right. So I'm going to have to give you an answer that you may not like, because it's the real answer. Because I'll tell you why. I've read so many business books, and I've watched so many YouTube videos, and I've been to so many online webinars, and everyone's telling you, here's the 7.5 steps to building a successful business in 30 days. And, here's how to get to your first $1 million in 6.5 weeks or whatever. Like, I'm just tired of all that crap, because it's all hot, and most of it's hot air. It really depends. There's so many factors. Do you understand that, you got to have the right product. You got to have the right people. It's got to be at the right time. There were times when I came up with a business and it was just not the right time for that business. You know, it could be you can have the perfect product, perfect team, perfect, but if it's not the right time, it's not going to happen, right? And it could be the right time, but you don't have the right product, or it could be you have the right product at the right time, but you don't have the right team. You have to have the right people. So there's various factors that go into it. I'm going to give you the blunt answer. Just start, just keep doing and failing and keep moving forward, and don't spend too long on an idea. Like, if people are not willing to pay for it, don't kid yourself. Like, don't hide behind, oh, well, you know, I'm still getting the website, you know, together, because the website no one buys because your website looks pretty, okay? No one cares about your logo or your brand name. Like, you don't have a brand name until you're Coca-Cola or you're, like, you know, Pepsi. You don't have a brand name. It's nonsense.
By the way, I make so many people upset with me all the time, because when we help with companies rebrand, right, or startups create a brand, right, they always ask me, it's like, so what do you think? What should we do? How's this name? What does this look? And I tell them, I said, I gotta be totally honest with you. Nobody cares. Nobody cares what your brand logo looks like or what your name is. But the only people who care is the person who creates it and the person who buys it. And sometimes the person who creates it doesn't really care either. They're just doing it because you're buying it. But that's not the point.
It's like a baby. It's like babies. My wife says to me, "Hey, look at this baby. Don't you think it's cute?" I'm like, "No, it's not mine. It's just a baby." Right? I mean, it sounds like such a guy thing to say, but it's true. Like, my baby's cute, like, because it's mine.
Yeah, well, you know? My baby could beat up your baby in the park, so I don't want to. Anyways, so what we say is, you know, so what I tell them, I say, look, you know, to be totally honest, no one cares about your brand, what your logo looks like. You know, you will, because you're paying for it. I said, what they will care about is the association that you put on it, right? When you tell people the name of your company, when you show people your brand presentation, they will accept what you give them because you're presenting it with confidence and pride, right? And that's what's important here, right? It's you're right. You know, you're absolutely right here.
The bottom line, Aaron, is like this: find a problem that people have, solve it, and if they're paying you for it, you have a business. Until then, you don't have anything. That's it. It's that simple.
So let's talk about podcasting, right?
Yeah.
How the heck did you get into the world of podcasting?
It was actually a gift from heaven. Like, it literally, I'm serious. I had no idea. I'll give you the story. So about 4 years ago, so me and my family, we moved to Israel, and I basically ended up pretty much being almost semi-retired because I hated doing so much in the business. I outsourced everything to the point where today it's 9 years old and I haven't sent an email in 5 years. So the business still runs on its own completely. So I got to that point where I basically didn't really have to do anything. And I was playing tennis and I get this phone call that totally changed my life. It sounds cheesy, but it really happened. And it ruined my tennis game because I was like really in the middle. But anyway, guy calls me up and he says, "Daniel, I heard you have a really interesting business story. I'd like to have you on my podcast." And I'll never forget what I said to him. I said, "What the heck is a podcast?" I had no idea. It sounded like some sort of spaceship, you know, podcast. Anyway, so he explains to me what a podcast was. And I got really excited because I'd never spoken in public, right? I didn't have any social media following, no social media accounts. My wife had a Facebook account to share pictures of our kids, which I had no idea what the point of that was. But anyway, I had nothing. There was no online presence. I was invisible, right?
Okay.
And so I said, "Yeah, sure. I'd love to be a guest on your podcast. What do I have to do? Where do I have to go?" He's like, "Nowhere. You just put on a headset and you could sit wherever you want. And that's it." I'm like, "Wow, this is so cool." So I'm sitting there in my bedroom, put on a headset, I start talking, and, you know, an hour goes by and it feels like 5 minutes. And I thought, wow, this is so much fun. Like, this is incredible. I feel like I could do this for hours and hours. And he said, "Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Daniel. You know, thanks." You know, I said, "Thanks for having me." And then I had this question in my head, which was, you know, how many people are listening to this? Because in my mind, I'm thinking maybe there's 20, 30 people, you know, which is fine, you know. He turns around and says, Daniel, there's over 1,000 people listening. I fell off my chair. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? No way there's 1,000 people listening to me. There's no way. Like, you think about it, right? Some of the biggest speakers, they get on stage. If they've got like 1,000 people in the audience, that's a packed crowd, right?
Correct.
That's a packed crowd. I'm thinking, I'm a nobody and I've got 1,000 people listening to me. I said, where are these people? He's like, they're all over the world. And he starts listing dozens of countries. And I'm saying, what? This is crazy. So I decided I have to get into podcasting. This is going to be huge. So 2 weeks later, I start my own podcast. I called it, Can I Pick Your Brain? And it's the annoying question that everyone asks people that they look up to. They're like, hey, can I pick your brain? Just really quickly. So I decided I'm going to pick the brains of some of the most successful, entrepreneurs, business people in our generation. There were only two problems, Aaron. One, I didn't know any successful people to interview. And
that could be a problem. Yeah, I hear that.
Right. And two, I didn't know how to get people to listen to my podcast. Like, how do I get people to come and find me? Where do I find these people? So that's when I had the aha moment where I said, hold on a second. That guy had over 1,000 people listening. And he had me on his show, and I'm like this nobody, really invisible guy. So, if he had over 1,000 people, I need to be getting on more podcasts, and then I could just talk about my own show, and hopefully they'll come and listen to my show. So essentially, I'll leverage other people's audiences. Similar to how, in the world of investing, you leverage other people's money. So I was leveraging a different currency. I was leveraging other people's audiences. And so I started getting on podcasts as much as I could. Within a very short period of time, I ended up growing my podcast to over 250,000 downloads, became a top-rated podcast on iTunes. I interviewed 4 billionaires, the world's smartest man, the leading hostage negotiator for the FBI, the US memory champion, Fortune 500 CEOs. Yeah.
And how did you get these people? You just called them up. You said, hey, come on my podcast?
No. These people were coming to me because I had this big show and I had this platform that they wanted to promote their book on. Most of it was, they wrote a book. And here's the thing, podcasts sell books like hotcakes. Like whenever you see someone doing, publishing a book, they start getting on as many podcasts as they can because that's the best way to sell books, because people who listen to podcasts read books, right? And a book is something that's a very low investment. So you could sell, we had a client, we'll get into how I started my company, but we had a client who sold 30,000 books in less than 90 days just getting on podcasts. It was incredible. Wow. So what happened is that I wrote my own book, right? And then went on podcasts to promote the book. And that became a #1 bestseller on Amazon just from getting on the podcast. So clearly there was something incredible about getting on these podcasts. But then what happened was I started getting bombarded with emails from PR agencies and people wanting to get on my show, like PR agencies trying to get their clients on my podcast. The problem there's two things, Aaron. One, they didn't have a relationship with me, so I didn't know who they were. They didn't know who I was. And number two is they were really bad at positioning their client. They all sounded really boring and they sounded the same, right? So I just kept sending them to spam. Like literally 95% of the emails that I got, and I got dozens of these a day, I would send them to spam. So a couple of months go by and I'm like, just constantly sending these emails to spam. And one day I wake up and I said, hold on a second here. People are paying, a lot of money to hire these PR agencies, and all they're doing is sending these crappy emails and it's not working. I've got my own top-rated podcast. I've been on over 60 podcasts. I'm friends with all these top-rated hosts, and I've interviewed over 150 high-profile guests. So I know what a great guest sounds like and how to position them. I know what a top-rated host is looking for in a guest, and I have the relationships with these top-rated hosts. Why don't I start my own podcast booking agency? And that's how Gefen Media Group was born. And for the last 3.5 years, we've worked with some very big clients and got them on the top. We only work with the top 500 podcasts, and there's currently now 1.5 million podcasts that are out there, and that number is constantly growing. Every day, there's thousands of new podcasts being launched, and there's over 150 million Americans listening to podcasts right now. So it's absolutely insane. But then there was another issue that I saw, another gap in the market, which was I'm only serving the top percentage of people because, most people can't afford to spend thousands of dollars on an agency like mine. Right. And at the same time, there are all these hundreds of thousands of podcast hosts who need guests, but they're not getting guests because they're not big enough, right? So no one's coming to them. So how do they find guests? And that's when I had the idea for podbooker.com. So Podbooker essentially is a marketplace where guests can find hosts and they can actually reach out to them and pitch them on the platform and get booked on the platform as guests on their show. And hosts can also find guests and book them on the platform as well. And that's basically how we got to where we are today.
That's amazing. So it's like a dating site for podcasting.
Exactly. Boom. So that's actually the tagline that I was going to go with, but we haven't yet.
Do we swipe right or swipe left? Which way does that go?
Yeah.
That's fabulous. And so so this is a relatively new thing, like podbooker.com. Yes. It's a relative. How long have you?
Podbooker has been out only for, I think, now 6 weeks, and we've already got over 350 users. And the best part about it is we've had just over 150 bookings done through the platform.
That's fantastic.
So, yeah, it's incredible, and it's free right now. We're not yet at we're pre-revenue, so we haven't yet started charging subscription. So if your audience is listening to this, I would jump on it now while it's still free. And also, I'll say something else which is really interesting. So I see podcasts as undervalued attention right now. Right. And in marketing, the number one thing that you want to be going for is undervalued attention. Right. Because whenever there's a saturation in the market, it's going to cost you. It's going to be expensive. So, for example, let's take Google. Right. My first company, I scaled it because basically I had a couple of Indians, building me backlinks. It cost me like $300 a month. And I was like number 2, number 3 on Google. And the phone was ringing off the hook. So that was incredible. That was undervalued attention. But then as the market started saturated and everyone started to play the same game, Google changed their algorithm and then it became very expensive. You had to pay for Google ads. Now, even when Google ads came out, it was cheap. It was 10 cents a click, 20 cents a click. It was nothing, peanuts, right? Today, for those same keywords, you're spending $10 to $20 a click. It's extremely expensive. Facebook ads.
A click. That's just a click. That's not necessarily like a quality lead. That's just a click.
That's just a click to get to the website. It's crazy. Facebook ads is the same thing. A while ago, Facebook ads was, again, relatively cheap and you can get on there and brilliant. Now it's become way more expensive. So the later you get in the game, the more expensive it becomes to play the game. Right now, people say to me, but Daniel, aren't we late to the game? The podcasting has been around for a number of years now and there's already 1.5 million podcasts. Let me tell you something. Now is early. And the reason why I'm telling you that is because, number one, podcasts are still free to get on. Hosts are not charging guests to be on their show. Like, Aaron, did you charge me anything to get on this show?
I did not. Only your smile.
Right. So I basically come on Aaron's podcast. Now, Aaron has invested time and money and energy into building this podcast, right? He has to produce the podcast. He has to edit it. He has to prepare for the guest. He has to find the guest. He has to then go and publish it. Then he has to promote it. So he's spending all this time and effort and energy building up this audience. And Daniel comes along for free and basically takes advantage of the whole thing. And, after like an hour, Daniel says, "Thank you very much, Aaron," and bye-bye, right? It's incredible.
Well, if you put it that way, then, hey, we have something to talk about.
Right. Well, here's the thing. Hosts are starting to realize something. They're saying, hold on, I have something of value here. So now I started noticing in the market, there are hosts, the bigger ones, that are charging guests money. So, for example, John Lee Dumas of Entrepreneur on Fire, that used to be free to get on. But now he charges, guess how much he charges to be on his show?
I don't even know.
Yeah, not $100, not $500. He charges
$10,000.
No, $3,500 to be a guest on his show. It's insane. Yeah. And if you think about it, even if hosts only charge $100, that means for every 10 podcasts you go on as a guest, you're spending $1,000, right? Right now, it's 100% free, which means that if 6 months from now or a year from now, you did not get on podcasts, you're going to be kicking yourself because you're going to be saying, why didn't I take advantage of this when it was free? Right?
So Daniel, so are you saying I should be charging you $100?
Not now, but after this episode, you could charge whatever you like. For sure.
Let me ask you a question. You said that being a guest, being a host, being involved with the podcast, like you know what it takes. you know what it takes to get into the whole, all the avenues of what it means to be a good guest, a good host, a good podcaster. And I imagine that part of the success of that is being able to share and bring people into a great story of what you're actually here to talk about, right? It's not just about, look, there are some podcasts that people just shoot the breeze. They don't talk about anything, right? And that's fun because you just listen to what they have to say. But most podcasts have a point, and people and the guests have something to talk about. It's like, story that they're bringing in. What are those points that make a good story tellable in order for people to want to engage with you?
Okay, so I'll start off with the fact that most people, for some reason, think that their story is boring. That's just how we are, right? Just like you think that your own voice is annoying, right? When I first recorded my podcast and I couldn't listen to it, I'm like, oh my God, I sound terrible. Like, is that me? That's not me, right? But as you keep doing it, just like anything else, you get used to it. So now when I listen to my voice, I hear my voice. I'm not put off by it. It just sounds normal.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. You just have to get used to it. So the same thing here is that you got to realize that you think your own story is boring, but most people don't. Most people actually there are people who would be inspired by your story, right? So at first, I didn't think it was a big deal that I was a class clown. And like, I thought it was a stupid story to share because like, who cares? Like, okay, I was a class clown. I got bullied. I was da-da-da. But then I realized that there were so many people that when I shared it, came back to me and said, wow, Daniel, I really relate to your story. I was also the class clown. So a lot of people could relate to your story. And the key to getting people to buy into you is to become relatable. You want to be relatable. That's the number one thing, because when people relate to you, then they'll buy into what you're doing. So,
and by the way, that is the number one marketing hack that will never get old. Is that as long as you always know how to relate to your audience, as long as you always know how to bring them in that relatable moment, you will always be able to find your success. Always.
Yeah. And the truth is a story really comes down to three parts, right? If you want any successful story, comes down to there's three parts to it. And you could see this with any Hollywood movie, right? Anything like that. You've got the first part, which is the struggle or the underdog, right? It's the struggle or the underdog. The second part is the breakthrough. It's the aha moment. And then the third part is the hero that comes off of the other side. It's the success. And if you think of any movie that you've watched, pretty much you could see that playing out, right? And what happens is that you start off the story with hey, here's the guy who was bullied in high school, who was basically a class clown that needed attention and felt depressed because of it. Okay, that's the underdog. That's the sad part. That's the struggle. Then you've got the aha moment, the breakthrough. What's the breakthrough? The breakthrough is, for me personally, was getting on podcasts and getting out there and building my confidence and becoming someone that I felt I could help other people. Then there's the success, the hero at the end, which is, being a top-ranked podcast host, a best-selling author, and all the other things. So in your own story, you have to find those three parts to the story. What was the part that people can relate to? Everyone relates to the struggle, because if you think about it, the people that you are helping, the people that you are who are going to be your clients, are the people who are going to relate to your struggle. And then when you talk about the breakthrough has to be something that has to do with how you're going to help them. So notice how my breakthrough was getting on podcasts and finding myself and finding my voice and being able to become somebody somewhat of an authority in my space. And that happens to be the thing that I'm selling, right? I'm selling you on getting on podcasts by getting on Podbooker, right? So, and then you see how that works, right? And then the third stage is the success, which is where you share your successes and, all the things that you've achieved as a result. And that's it. It's a very simple formula, but it works every time. That's the story.
That's a great story. Tell me, who are some of the coolest, most fun people you've interviewed on your podcast? Can I pick your brain?
Well, I could tell you one that was a train wreck and became probably one of the most talked about episodes, and that was with Robert Kiyosaki from Rich Dad Poor Dad. So I'm sure a lot of your listeners have heard of him, right? He wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Sure.
So I read that book when I was 18 years old. I was very inspired. He's got a very good message in there. It's very smart. But when I interviewed him, I must have pressed the wrong buttons because he totally lost it on me. Like,
oh my gosh,
lost it. Yeah, he went absolutely nuts. And I still get people reaching out to me today saying, Daniel, oh my goodness, I just listened to your podcast with Robert Kiyosaki. And how did you manage to stay calm? Like, he just went nuts. And I'm like, I just felt like he went senile. Maybe he lost the plot at some point. I don't know if success went to his head.
Oh my gosh.
But I've had people who, unfortunately, they were people I looked up to, and when I interviewed them, I saw a side of them that, unfortunately, I guess I didn't want to see. It's a sad fact that sometimes people let the ego get the better of them. Success is it's a sword. You can either use it for good or use it for evil. You could feed your ego, or you can help others. It's a choice, but that was one of my most memorable. The other one was I interviewed a billionaire called Jeff Hoffman, he's the founder of Priceline.com, Booking.com, Hotels.com, and a whole bunch of other businesses. Very incredible person. First of all, extremely humble. I mean, if you listen to that episode, this guy's a billionaire, legit, and he's so humble. It's incredible. But my favorite line that he said to me was, I said to him, Jeff, there's only 2,000 billionaires in the entire planet. How is it that you managed to make, over $1 billion?
Right.
What separates you from everyone else? And he said to me this line, which stuck with me. He said, Daniel, I have a sign in my office on the wall, and it reads as follows. It says, ideas are welcome here, but execution is worshipped. He's like, I worship execution. It's all about execution. The ideas, there is a dime a dozen. It's all about the execution. You've got to just keep going. You've got to keep taking action. People who are thinking about, people listening to this right now saying, Daniel, I'm sold, man. I want to get on podcast. Like, this is crazy. I need to get on this train, but like, I don't know if I'm ready. Like, it's maybe I need to do this. Maybe I need to do that. Listen to the words of Jeff Hoffman, the billionaire. Like, execution is everything. Just get on there.
Was that your inspiration for how to build a business? Just get out there and go and start?
For me, it was just, I think like I said, I couldn't work for anyone, and I had a family to feed. We have 5 children, thank God. Yeah. So, I don't really have a choice. And my wife's from California, so she likes nice things. So I need to make her happy, happy wife, happy life, right? So my motivation is to make my wife happy. That is my sole motivation more than anything else.
That's a good motivation. It's a good one.
That's it. Yeah. So if my wife wants a house with a swimming pool, then that's my motivation. My question now is, okay, that's it. Now, what do I got to do? Right. That's and right. whatever it is. So that's it. I mean, everybody has what motivates them. You just got to find that thing, and that's going to keep you going.
When we work with our sales team, right, and we're managing them, the thing that we ask them all the time is, what are you visualizing that your money is going to buy you, that you're working for, right? Where is it? A pool? Is it a new house? Is it a vacation? Is it a plot of land? Is it a bridge? Is it what is it? And let's put a picture to it, because I want to help you build the steps in order to get to that point where you're actually saying, oh, I'm buying that right now because I worked for it. I got there. Mm-hmm. Totally. I'm totally in with that. That's great.
Yeah.
We're going to have to put the links to those podcast interviews in the links to this show, because I'm sure a lot of people are going to want to hear those both the good and the bad of how, of what podcasting could be all about. So that's great.
Yeah, they could type into their whatever they're listening to this podcast on. They could type in "Can I pick your brain?" And they'll find the podcast on there.
That's great. Daniel, I want to thank you for coming on Executive Talk. It was an absolute pleasure to have you here to begin the conversation with you, to talk about business and podcasting and marketing and all these things. And I hope that this is the start of a continued conversation that we get to have together again and again. It was really a wonderful pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aaron, for having me on. And I look forward to hearing from any of your audience as well. Please feel free to reach out to me.
I absolutely will. By the way, ever since I discovered Podbooker, I've been telling everyone about it. I said, this is a platform, you guys got to check it out. It really is. It's going to be a game changer for the world of communication. You know?
Yeah.
Great.
I appreciate it. Really do.
No problem. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Have an amazing day. We'll talk later. Okay. So,
Sweet.
how was?
Good. It was really good. Yeah. What do you think? I always ask people, what do they think of me being a guest? I always like to improve on what I do. So,
well, so what's funny is that sometimes you could be a good guest and a horrible host. Sometimes you could be a great host and a horrible guest.
true.
I have to honestly admit that I really enjoyed this conversation with you. I really had a great time chatting with you. You had good things to share. Your content is valuable, and you really bring a great warmth and energy to all the things that you're talking about. I think is fabulous.
Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it. You know what? It's a marketing podcast, and what I noticed is that a lot of people they kind of get very they just talk about the marketing aspect of things. But the problem is that we live in a world where everyone has relationships and self-development and growth. So I like to just sprinkle things in because, you know what I'm saying? Like we're human beings after all. So it may not have been a specifically like a just marketing conversation, just talking about marketing, but it's just, I guess, my sort of.
No, but look, I don't think. I think the majority of people, look, we have a lot of listeners and followers who are in the business world and marketing world. And on principle, I know it's counterintuitive for me. On principle, when I get online and I talk about and I share content stuff, I do not talk about details of marketing. I do not get into here's how you run an ads campaign,
right?
Because the majority of people don't care. I mean, like it might be interesting to them. They're all running ads for their businesses, but they're not the ones who are specifically doing it. And so I personally like to take a more of a holistic approach to understanding business and personalities and, what goes into that business, because I think that's really what people want to know about. Not everyone is interested about how to identify the top 5 keywords for your blog post that's going out next week.
Yeah.
And so it's a conscious decision to